Well, hello friends, neighbors, welcome to my deck, and a nice cool Saturday to talk a little bit of Canadian whiskey. I'm getting close to maybe a little bit of holiday time. The school year is almost done, and we're also coming up to Canada Day, and I realized as I look back that almost, like, I think it was June 28th, I think it's the 27th today, I reviewed another 40 Creek Special Edition. So I guess this has become a tradition. Of course, now I'll have to try to keep that up. But I would like to talk to you. I'm going to shoot hopefully a couple of reviews this weekend of Canadian whiskey. And so this is a great classic to talk about. This is 40 Creek. It's their annual special release. This is the 2019 special release from 40 Creek, and it's called Victory. We'll talk about it after the break.
3, 4.
Thanks for staying with me through that somewhat complicated introduction. I was just trying to say, look, we're heading into Canada Day, and it'd be a great idea to look for some Canadian whiskey to try, celebrate this great nation. And I just noticed that I also talked about 40 Creek basically a year ago. Today I want to talk about Victory. This is, as I was trying to say, 40 Creek releases an annual special release. I think it's like their 13th release. So they've been doing it for 13 years. And it's an interesting idea where they try to release something, lower bottle count. I mean, this talks about lot and number of bottle and that kind of thing, that has a bit of a history or a bit of a story. And I applaud that. I really do like single barrel or special release or innovative, from two brewers. Like, I really like, trying a few different things. And I think this is their nod to say, like, let's try to release something a bit special. Victory is, the 205th anniversary of the engagement at the 40, June 8th, 1813. I'm not enough of a history buff, but I believe that was, part of the, I think it started at Stony Creek, and then it was just to continue where the Canadian forces, the British forces, Canadian forces, pushed back the Americans. Back to the whiskey. This one is similar to last year's, this is 2019, so it already is last year's, but the year before was Unity, where they've selected some choices from, I think, 5 fans and then blended and mixed and whatever. But what I want to say is this is similar in that 40 Creek is known for keeping aged stocks separate corn, separate barley, separate rye. Then they blend and maybe marry in oak and release. Similar here. Somewhere in that 4 or 5 range of all that separate stocks they've blended. And then they've taken that, and part of it, depending on the website that I've read, so it's not official release, but about half of it was re-aged in, I think they call it vanilla wood staves. Or one site said vanilla wood staves were put into the marrying barrels. I'm not sure which is accurate. I believe when they talk about this vanilla wood, it's that they cook the wood, toasted, not fired, like not getting that charred, but really heated to bring out some of the sugars of the wood. Anyways, half of it's aged in that vanilla wood. And then they have some higher, like 100% corn whiskey that's about 10 years old or so. They added some of that. And then they added some of their Starboard wine, which, as I understand it, is basically port, but it's not aged or created in blank, the region that it has to be called port. But the point is, it's fortified wine. And there's some history in that. And the reason why I'm connecting this back to Unity is Unity had some of the very same blending techniques. They had some unique kind of fan blending in there as well. But basically, they take their stock. Back then it was mocha staves, I think. This is high vanilla staves. And then to add some of that fortified wine. They did that last time, and they've done that here. It's about all I know. Most of that's just through reading various websites. So I don't have any first-hand knowledge, but it's a pretty classy presentation. It's a big bottle on the shelf, and a striking dark color. Sadly, I'm pretty sure that is color added. Released at 43, so a little bit up to 40. Let's talk what we get on the whiskey. Whatever's gone into it, at least we can talk about our what we get on the nose and how the flavor excites us or doesn't. Let's see. This nose is at once, classic Canadian. It's got some of that high sugar, maple sugar, toffee sugar. But it's got a little bit of dark fruiting already in the nose. And a little bit of a buttering or a cooking involved. Spicing is not coming out of the nose for me. It stays true to that sweeter, maybe some vanillas. Not maybe, vanillas. Light red fruits, wine gum sugar, candy, those candies. But, okay, now there's a little bit of spicing. Now a little bit of... No, spicing went away. I was going to go into cinnamon. Maybe it's there. But it's not a spice bomb on the nose. Mostly sweet, but well cooked and well layered sweet with some red fruiting. Yeah, that's the nose. See how it tastes. Cheers. That's a tasty whiskey. I was a little generous in that sip. Fair amount of wine character in this for me. Let's try to come back to that. The body of the whiskey is still giving me, now there's a bit of rye spice, some wood tannins, a little bit of youth. And youth in this case is like a brashness, a little bit of burn. But nice, there's some oil in the mouthfeel, so it's got some coating nature in there. Maybe that's the corn. And a little bit of green. But actually it's more caramel, toffee, maple, a little bit of nut. And then the wine influence. It a little bit toward other Canadians would be, it's not as far down the path as the Wayne Gretzky series, like the Ice Cask. I was going to say 7 Oak. That's not it. Triple Oak, the 7-year. Where you got a significant wine influence. And of course, that's because they have actually added starboard wine. Just poured it right in. And that's got to be what's coming out. The sweetness from the high vanilla wood is there. It's very sweet. It's a very sweet dessert-styled whiskey. That must have been a big sip. Yeah, subsequent sips for me bring out that interplay between vanilla, caramel, and wine. The rye influence for me is in the edges. There's some spicing, and also the way it finishes. It's not a super long finish, but it finishes at one part drying, which I think is really a lot to do with that rye note. So it's got a bit of drying. Then it skates off into the distance as a really relaxed, sweet dessert whiskey. I think it's fairly similar to Unity. You can tell I'm not far down this bottle. I did have a sample someone sent to me, a few hundred mils, and then I had a sample before that. So actually, since it's been released, I've kind of been sipping it, but then this bottle is fairly fresh. It may change yet with some time. I can appreciate this. I struggle a little bit with the cost of the special releases. It's a fairly young whiskey, and at times it can show its astringency. However, I kind of like this mix. Oh, also in the past I've given it knocks, and I should say, pouring wine in it, I've heard people argue that, if you take a wet ex-sherry, it's the same thing. Well, possibly. But there's something different about taking a barrel, an aged wine or aged sherry, dumping it, and then putting whiskey in it, aging it, and having its influence. Then in the vat, they dump in barrels of wine. I can forgive it because I think it adds an interesting flavor profile. This is a fairly complicated Canadian whiskey, but I also struggle with the whole dump it in. There's something with that does bother me. I've come to terms with it with 40 Creek because they did it with Unity and now with Victory, and I've heard the next coming release will be the third in that series of blending and corn and starboard wine. I'm kind of rambling because I'm trying to hedge on a score. It's probably going to end up very similar to what I've scored the last two, Heritage and Victory, at, which is it kind of set like it is a quality Canadian whiskey, and it pushes just into that 4 star. It's not an emphatic 4, but it's good. It's tasty. It stands very well on its own. I've said a few times now, a dessert whiskey. I would absolutely see this like you've had a really nice steak on Canada Day. Here I'm in Alberta, so it better be Alberta beef, and you've had a really good meal. You've sat down with some good friends, and you just want to, sip and talk into the evening. I think this whiskey would be a great backdrop because it's sweet enough that it will appeal to a broad group of harder liquor drinkers. But I mean, it's not even whiskey drinkers. They might think, it's kind of it's fairly sweet. That might put off, really good Scotch drinkers. I don't mean really good. I mean people who really only drink Scotch because it doesn't have enough of that older wood, less sweetness, malty character like that I think you're looking for in a Scotch. For bourbons, you got to play like whether you're getting that corn sour sweetness or this. So it's decent. Looking for a good Canadian whiskey? You know what? If you're in St. Albert or Edmonton, you're in luck. The store that I always talk about, and I don't know, they should give me a discount. But the Olympia series of stores, like on 137, carries this still on the shelf in the box for under $70. That's great. I think that's a solid price for this. I wish these guys would put out a little bit older whiskey because in general I've seen it on other shelves, not now, but when it came out for around $85, and $85 is a lot to charge for a whiskey. And with that, I feel like everything in there should be more like a 10-year-old or something like that. But I don't want to get too hung up on age. It's a special release. It's an annual release. They obviously take a little more care selecting what they do. So, yeah, I'm happy at 4. Certainly worth it if you can find it at an Olympia liquor store, and worth considering. Till the next couple of videos where I am going to shoot some Canadian, and I apologize to the majority of my audience that really doesn't see these, but still it's good to know. Canada's putting out some interesting whiskey. You guys have a great weekend.